UFO crash retrievals, the ultimate holy grail of UFO research. Now, why am I calling it the ultimate holy grail? Well, it's pretty simple, because it's the crash retrievals that are going to be the vehicle that facilitates disclosure. They have the bodies, the debris, and the craft all wrapped up into one entity. That's why this is so important, because without these crash retrieval legacy witnesses coming forward in open congressional hearings, we're all going to be here another 50 years and we still won't know what's going on. That's why it's the crash retrievals that are absolutely pertinent to this discussion here. Now, a couple of announcements, and hopefully you can see these here. The content of each case highlighted in this presentation has remained intact per the description of the original source. The identity of first-hand sources will be protected per Leonard Stringfield's original agreement with his military contacts. The visual aids used in this presentation are computer-generated forensic composite illustrations and sketches, which originated from specific details provided by Leonard's sources. So this is the resource pool that Leonard used to get his information. So 3-star U.S. Air Force generals, U.S. Air Force fighter pilots, astronauts, commercial pilots, air traffic controllers, neurosurgeons, pathologists, theoretical physicists, and mathematicians, U.S. Army officers, U.S. Navy officers, military police, high-level Pentagon officials, top military brass, scientists and engineers who worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and other government facilities. So this is just a cross-section of the caliber of first-hand military witnesses that Leonard had talked with. A couple of quick quotes. UFO crash retrievals can't be real, because if they were, I would have read about it in the local newspaper. Number 2, there are not now, nor ever have been, any extraterrestrial visitors or equipment on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, that's their official press release, July 1980. So what we want to do in this presentation is we're going to take the press release from Air Force stating that there's nothing to any of this, and we're going to go up against Leonard Stringfield's first-hand military witnesses, and we'll see who kind of comes out on top here. Now, this is the man of the hour. I want to introduce everyone to Leonard Stringfield. Over a period of 30 years, he collected dozens and dozens and dozens of these first-hand military witnesses. He's the one who coined the term UFO crash retrieval. So credit goes to Leonard Stringfield here. Now, I want to give you some biographical points here before we get into the material. Leonard was born in 1920. He grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. By the time he graduated from high school in 1939, he'd already memorized the entire dictionary. They gave him a name, and they called him Webster, so that was the nickname they gave him. He joined the military as soon as he heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7th, 1941. During World War II, Leonard served in the intelligence service of the 5th Air Force in the Southwest Pacific Theater. After the war, he was employed by a chemical company in Ohio. He retired after 30 years. Leonard served as director of the world's largest UFO research group in the mid-1950s, Civilian Research Interplanetary Flying Objects. He received 8,000 letters in its first 2 weeks of existence. He worked in cooperation with the Air Force Defense Command of the U.S. Air Force 1953 to 1957, investigating and reporting UFO activity. Served as president of the Cincinnati UFO Society in the late 1950s. Leonard served in public relations for NICAP under Donald Keyhoe from 1957 to 1970, conducted a course study on ufology at Marymount High School in 1969. He wrote 2 books, Inside Saucer Post 3-0 back in 1957, Situation Red, the UFO Siege, 1977. Served as board of directors and director of public relations for MUFON, served as Ohio investigator for Ground Saucer Watch, and this point here, this is the one we want to drill down on. His lecture on UFO crash retrievals at the 1978 MUFON Symposium in Dayton, Ohio, caused an international sensation. Now, why did it cause an international sensation? A couple of reasons. Number 1, this was the first time that the whole concept of UFO crash retrievals was coming onto the radar screen. It really hadn't been heard of before. Now, Roswell was just coming on to the first book, coming into the public domain. very early in the research. The second thing is why there was some pushback is that the agreement that Leonard made with his witnesses is that he could preserve an important part of our national history by telling these accounts, but the identities of his witnesses had to be kept under wraps. So there was some pushback at the MUFON symposium because there was no way to third-party independently verify these military witnesses because Leonard would not release the names, and he kept the names down until his death. He passed away December 18th, 1994. So what was the one event that sparked Leonard's interest in UFOs, which ultimately changed the course of his life? There was one significant event. On August 30th, 1945, Leonard had a Foo Fighter sighting from inside a twin-engine C-47 while traveling from Okinawa to Iwo Jima. And there was a couple of Foo Fighters right outside the window. He got a good look at these. One of the engines started sputtering, and they thought they were going to have to ditch in the ocean. But when the Foo Fighter flew away, engine came back on, they landed safely. And so this is Newcastle Sun, January 3rd, 1945. Foo Fighters are latest. Pilots flying over Germany at night report that strange balls of fire are following them around on their missions. They have christened these strange phenomenon Foo Fighters. This is Cincinnati Enquirer, July 19th, 1993. Author continues quest for truth about UFOs. What I've collected has staggering implications for mankind. This would be the biggest thing since Christ, really. That is a bold statement. It's a very bold statement, but it's true. If even one of these is correct and authentic, it is the biggest thing since Christ. I want to mention that there were 22 bank boxes of original correspondence, letters, drawings, sketches, telephone numbers of all of these witnesses that Leonard had dealt with. This is the kind of material that needs to go to open congressional hearings. So I want to take you to the 1978 MUFON symposium here. We'll go inside, and here's Leonard giving his lecture, Retrievals of the Third Kind, which was a bombshell presentation. This stuff hadn't been heard before this time. This is a front cover copy of his symposium proceeding. So Retrievals of the Third Kind, a case study of alleged UFOs and occupants in military custody, presented by Leonard Stringfield. And this is a very lengthy symposium proceeding. And he goes case after case of these firsthand military witnesses, the kind of witnesses that held the bodies, loaded the craft onto 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks and shipped them to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. X-ray technician reports. That's the caliber of witnesses that Leonard had dealt with. Now, everything that we're going to be talking about today comes from this book, UFO Crash Retrievals, The Complete Investigation Status Reports 1 through 7 by Leonard Stringfield. So if you want to go into the intricate details of this, I'm going to give you the page number, the location, how many bodies were recovered, what the craft looked like. All of that is in this book. And I'll give you the references so you can verify this on your own. Second research portion is this book by Ryan Wood, Magic Eyes Only, Earth's Encounters with Extraterrestrial Technology. This was published about 20 years ago. He updated it. So in Leonard's publication, we have 119 crash retrieval cases. In Ryan Wood's recently updated publication, there's an additional 104 cases. So you can see how the numbers are climbing here. Now, before we get into the material, I want to take the entire audience to Las Vegas for just a minute here. And we're going to go to Caesar's Palace, and we're going to go to the roulette wheel. And this roulette wheel has 119 basic spaces here. Let's just call it 120 spaces. And we're going to put down a bet for each 119 crash retrieval Leonard Stringfield military witnesses. So the odds are 119 to 1 in our favor. We can't lose. We can't lose. We literally almost cannot lose. So what I'm getting toward this is all we need is one of these crash retrievals to be correct and authentic. And the whole concept of UFO crash retrieval and non-existence completely falls apart. So again, the odds are in our favor. We only need one of these to be correct. Now, isn't it interesting? In this country, we have something called the First Amendment. It's our freedom of speech. Isn't it just lovely that we have something like this? So What I'm saying here with this freedom of speech is that when you talk about who owns things and the proprietary information, and who is the owner of facilities and assets, when you really think about it, it is the taxpayer that owns these assets. We have every reason and every right to question authority. So I'll give you an example. Over at Edwards Air Force Base, we as taxpayers own the runways, we own the buildings, we own the aircraft, we pay for their salaries, we own all the support equipment. The United States government is nothing more than a temporary custodian of these events, of these assets. We own this stuff. We have every right to question authority, and we should. That's our obligation. That is our privilege. UAP hearings, July 26, 2023. So you've got Ryan Graves, Navy pilot, David Grush, U.S. Air Force Intel, David Fravor, F-A-18 Super Hornet pilot, which you're all familiar with here. Just want to highlight what he stated. Now, this is his quote from David Grush. I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval program. Let me go to the newspaper clipping here. So this is Waterloo Region Record, July 27, 2023. Whistleblower says multi-decade program that captures UFOs is being concealed. Now, they're the ones that are saying this here. Let's continue on. I want to give credit to my good sketch artist, Rudy Gardea, for all of the preliminary artwork, refined drawings, all comes from Rudy Gardea. Now, let's get going on our first case here. This is UFO crash retrieval in 1942. This is long before Roswell, at an Army base north of Georgia that even Leonard didn't know where it was. This is UFO crash retrievals, page 319. So if anyone wants further details, it's page 319. Now, the craft measured 15 feet in diameter, was 10 feet high. There was hieroglyphic type marking written along the outer circumference of the craft itself, and then on the inside wall of the kind of like upper dome area. Now, there were three features to this craft. When this thing came down, it hit the side of the building, the Army facility, and it ripped a hull breach on the side of the craft. Now, there was a seating area, there was a control area, and then there was an entryway hatch on the bottom. The only way this works is, given the numbers that were given here, is that there is a primary floor that's cavernous and open. Below that, there's a subdeck with an entryway hatch. That's the only way this can possibly work. Now, there were 4 crew members taken alive. One was female, 5 feet tall, 90 pounds, large black eyes, milky white skin, and it had teeth as well. So let's go to the next slide here. This gives you kind of a blow up of what these markings might look like. Now, I believe that there is a transnational team of linguistic experts and engineers that are decoding and trying to decipher what these markings mean. There has to be these 3-ring binders full of all these symbols, cross-referencing. People who are linguistic experts have to be looking into this here. So I want to give your audience a world exclusive. I'm going to take you inside the Army facility, and we're going to go inside the craft. I'm going to give you a tour of the interior of the craft itself. So here we are at the Army facility. Now you can kind of see these marking and hieroglyphic type letterings and markings and symbols. Let's do another slide here. Here is the hull breach on the side of the craft. I'm going to rotate left now, where I'll give you a front view of the stairs and the entryway hatch to inside the craft itself. Okay, so now we're climbing up the stairs. We're now at the top of the stairs. We're looking forward now. You can kind of see this central divider. Off to the left, you've got the seats. Off to the right, you've got the control area. The reference for this case specifically stated that there were hieroglyphic markings on the inside of the craft as well. So here you have the seating area. And we did our best looking at this case multiple times over weeks, planning, engineering, what did the interior look like? This is the best representation that we could come up with based on the witness testimony from the Stringfield file. Let me zoom over to the right. I'm going to take you to the control area, and that's what this looks like. This is the best representation that we can do. Let me do a little bit of a blow up here. You can see the details here. So this is what we're looking at now. This is a final rendering here of the control section. And then I want to take you to the bodies. There were 4 bodies recovered. They were taken alive. They died 2 weeks later, but they were taken alive. And this is kind of a detailed view of what the bodies look like according to the Leonard Stringfield witness here. Final view on this one here. So 4 bodies recovered, taken alive. Next case, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. It had not become Wright-Patterson Air Force Base until 1947, when the Air Force was its own entity of the military. The source for this is an avionics mechanic and his son named Tex Martin. UFO Crash Retrievals, page 242, page 243. So not only do you have a 6-year-old boy that saw this, but his avionics mechanic father saw this as well. So you've got 2 independent sources. Now, what you're looking at here is a period correct photograph taken of Hangar Complex 4 Bay E. So it has Bay A, B, C, D, and E. And what you're looking at here on the right is Bay E. I believe it took place inside this hangar. Now, there was an adjoining cafeteria to the main hangar, and I'm going to take you to the next slide here. So the young 6-year-old Tex Martin was doing very good at school, and he was invited by his father to join him at Wright Field, which he did. So they're inside the cafeteria now, and there was a janitor that said, you know, this young boy looks very nice. I think I'm going to buy him a soda pop. So he hands him this soda pop, and as soon as he did that, there was a military personnel through this adjoining doorway, walks right through, and this little 6-year-old boy, he kind of peers inside this hangar, and he's kind of looking now inside the hangar. I'm going to go to Rudy's drawing. This gives you kind of a rough idea of what it looked like. So he's looking in the hangar now. And what does he see? He sees 2 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks with unknown tarp debris. He sees military personnel. There were a few Jeeps in there. There was an 18-foot diameter dish-shaped craft sitting on the hangar floor on tripod landing gear legs. There were at least 3 ET bodies deceased laying on the hangar floor on stretchers. And he's looking at all this. His father saw this as well. So here is the first pass drawing that gives you an idea of what this scene looks like. And Tex Martin is looking through that doorway back at us here because we reverse the viewing perspective. So now I want to take you to our refined drawing. And this is by Rudy Gardet. Now you can kind of get a real good idea of what it looked like inside the hangar. So bottom line is there were military personnel with rifles. Number 2, there was a Jeep there. There were 2 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks with unknown tarp debris. Then there was this off-white, about 20-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that had 2 rings wrapped around the outer circumference. It had tripod landing gear legs. And then there were 3 ET corpses laying on the hangar floor on stretchers. This is all from the report within the Leonard Stringfield book that I showed you earlier. Now, let's take this drawing as a template, and we'll go to the full color rendering. And this is what I came up with Joel Christopher Payne. I want to give him credit. So this is 1946. It's actually Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. And this is prior to Roswell here. So this is prior to Roswell. Let's continue on. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. So same location, basically same time frame. The witness is a private. He worked in records management. The source is Space, the Final Frontier, page 59 by Clark McClellan. This is the cover of the book. Within the book, there is this sketch that talks about something that was recovered from Arkansas and shipped on a railroad flat car all the way from Arkansas over to Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. Now, this thing was 15 feet in diameter, 7 feet tall. It had a flat section wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. There were rectangular windows wrapped around the outer circumference. No visible means of propulsion, no seams, basically no welds, no rivets, no fasteners, no socket head cap screws, no hex head cap screws, a brushed aluminum exterior configuration. Let me go to the next slide here. This is my AutoCAD drawing that shows you what this craft looks like, give you all the dimensions. On the upper right-hand section, I've cut away the skin showing you this central column that was about a 3 feet in diameter that went from the bottom of the craft through the midpoint, terminating at the lower section of the top of the craft itself. Now, I want to bring everyone's attention to the front view here. And if you go left of center of the central column, you'll see a red dot. That is the attempted point of entry where they're using diamond tip drill bits. I've got 3 additional cases within the Stringfield files where they're talking about using diamond tip drill bits to get into these craft, and they can't do it. They can't do it. So this is case number 1 of those. This was my very first pass full color illustration, just to give you an idea of what this craft may have looked like back at the time. This is Joseph Wright's much more refined illustration. He's got the red dot there that shows you where the attempted point of entry with the diamond tip drill bits. He's also pulled away the skin, showing you this central column. Now, there were no seats in this thing. There was no central control panel. It was like antiseptically sterile on the inside of the craft itself. So here is the scene. You've got the private and records management. He had a friend who was an MP, and when he was delivering a letter to a high-level military brass, he was met with his MP, and his friend said, you know what? I've got something I want to show you. So he brings him back to the hangar, in the back section of the hangar, and this craft is just sitting on the hangar floor. He said that there was a partially folded up tarp off to the right. In the foreground, there was an open toolbox with an electric drill and a diamond tip drill bit in there. So this is the scene here. Now we want to use this as a guide. I'm going to take you to Joseph Wright's full color rendering, and this is what we came up with back in 1946, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. Let's go on to the next one here. Now, who would have a need to know? Who would be someone that would be kind of in charge in this and absolutely have a need to know? Now, this is a letter from Nathan Twining to Air Force General George Shulgin, dated September 23rd, 1947. Here's what he said, quote, "The phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious." Later on in this document that you see here off to the right, he talks about the form, fit, and function of these vehicles. He talks about the flight path characteristics of these vehicles. So coming from Nathan Twining, it's a credible source. Let's continue on here. Papagos Indian Reservation, west of Globe, Arizona, January 1947. We're already 3-4 in. We're still not at Roswell yet. North of Superstition Mountains, witness served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. UFO crash retrievals, page 93, case A10. So if anyone wants to follow along and get all the intricate details, it's page 93, A10. So here you've got 2 military personnel. They're on this unimproved road in a Jeep. They're going down this road, and they are challenged and stopped by 2 MPs with rifles, telling them to get out of here immediately. You're not supposed to be here. This is a highly restricted retrieval operation, but it was already too late because these guys were at the right place at the right time when they were at the very beginning of a retrieval operation. Another 50 feet down this dirt road off to the left was a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that augured in at a 40-degree angle. There was a low-rise dome on top. There was 2 rings wrapped around the outer circumference, and then what looked like indented windows wrapped around the outer circumference as well. So now they're told to get out of here immediately, which they ended up leaving the area. So I want to go to our full color rendering, and this gives you an idea of what this may have looked like back in 1947 at the very beginning of this retrieval operation. Now, I enjoy getting details about the crash retrievals, absolutely, but I also want to know what happened to the hardware. So I've got a secondary project here. I want to know what happened to the hardware of all this. Within the Stringfield dictation notes, there was a reference that talked about Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company. So according to Mr. Robert Helmold, Foote Brothers Gear and Machine Company of Chicago conducted metallurgical analysis on pieces from a saucer that crashed in Arizona back in 1947. So I decided to do some digging. I wanted to find out what this company actually does. So here's Chicago Tribune, January 15th, 1955. It says the road to success. It makes gears as large as 21 feet in diameter and weighing 45,000 pounds and others small enough to put on a watch chain. Its gears are found on all airplanes of all types, including jets and helicopters. In a year, it will make thousands of different gears for use by industry. So it's beginning to check the boxes here. So I did some further research. This is Hendricks Commercial Register 1909. Now you get an idea of the size of the gears that this company makes. So if something crashed in the Arizona desert and it had an arc radius with some teeth on it that reminded the military personnel of a gear, you'd want to send it to this company for analysis. Completely checks all the boxes. This is Purchasing Agent 1923. You can see the size of the gears they make. So absolutely, this is checking all the boxes. They would absolutely have brought it to this company for analysis. Next one, White Sands Missile Range, July 4th, 1947. Our source is Technical Sergeant, U.S. Army Air Force, page 196 in the book. Now, what you're looking here at on this slide, the yellow section is the perimeter boundary of White Sands Missile Range. This thing came down at night on the northern part of the range. Here's Rudy's drawing. This thing was large, about 150 feet in diameter, came down at night at about a 20-degree angle on one of these sand dunes. Now, in the report, it said that the whole area was excruciatingly well lit. They had light alls, they had spotlights, they had different lights coming down on this craft. They had people with Geiger counters walking around this craft. They had people with still cameras taking shots of this. They had other people who were operating motion picture film cameras. This, in other words, it was very well documented. Let me go to the next slide here. So this shows you what this may have looked like back in 1947. You can see all the spotlights and shining lights, the light elves coming down on this. Bottom line is excruciatingly well lit. So what is the takeaway from this particular case? Since still photography and motion picture film was recorded of this event, senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances should track down and utilize this event evidence for future public hearings. That's exactly what needs to happen here. Now, there's a couple of problems that we're running into, and this is all recent. Same problems we're running into now. The senators and congressmen in Washington, D.C. do not have a high enough security clearance to access this information, and they have not been read into these programs. So how can they get access to the information and the data if they've never even been read into the program? They haven't been read into the program, and they don't have a high enough security clearance. That's what we're running into today. UFO crash retrieval in 1947, seen at a warehouse at Berkeley University, of all places. We have this gentleman's name, Albert Bruce Collins, long deceased. He was a metallurgical engineer. Source, UFO crash retrievals, page 197. So we have our witness. He's at the right place at the right time when this 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy truck backs into the warehouse at Berkeley. I'm going to go to the next slide here. And here you can see him off to the left, backs into the warehouse at Berkeley University. Now, he said there's a lot of talk about egg-shaped UFOs with Jake Barber. This is another egg-shaped UFO. He said it absolutely was egg-shaped, 30 feet across, 15 feet high. It literally had a crack from top to bottom, essentially. And he said that there was a central egg yolk or core that was 36 inches in diameter. On the forward section of this egg, there was a composite panel. There was another composite panel that wrapped around the outer circumference of the central yolk or core. He also said that there was a hole breach on the side of the craft with what looked like shrapnel and debris sticking out, indicating there might have been an internal implosion going on with this. So let's take this as a guide. We'll go to the full color rendering, and this is what we came up with, 1947 at Berkeley University. Let's continue on here. Now, Carrot Patch south of Salinas, California, July, August 1947. Seen by two 19-year-old workers in a remote nearby Carrot Patch field. So bottom line is this craft came down the night before. The foreman saw it. Next morning, when the two 19-year-old workers show up, foreman comes over to him and said, hey guys, I think you better take a look at this. So they walk over and see this craft. Here is the original sketch that came with the report. It was not a large craft, 9 feet in diameter, 4 feet tall, had a double row of indented, what looked like porthole windows, and the top was flat. Again, only 9 feet in diameter. In this case, there was a map. So X marks the spot. We know exactly where this thing came down. If we could go back in time, I could probably get you within plus or minus 300 feet of where this thing actually came down. This was my first pass to AutoCAD rendering. This gives you an idea of the sizes and dimensions, not a large craft. This was the very first pass SolidWorks rendering, just to give you an idea of what this may have looked like. And I'm going to go to Rudy's drawing now. The two 19-year-old workers walked up to this craft, according to the report. One of them got up enough confidence to actually kick the side of it, so he made contact with it. Within 5 minutes, there was a convoy of military vehicles that showed up. So there were 2 Jeeps. There was a covered 6x6 troop transport that was basically towing a lowboy tractor trailer. So the 2 young boys are told to vacate the area, get out of here, but they did see the entire retrieval operation. They saw the military personnel manhandle this craft, put it on the trailer, put a tarp over it, secure it with chains, and then they were out of here. So that was the retrieval operation. Here's our full color rendering by Joel Christopher Payne. Gives you an idea of what this retrieval operation would look like according to the primary witness here. Now, what is the $64 million question we want to look at here? Where are the top secret files on UFO crash retrieval being stored? So we want to know about the files here. They are kept in 3 large computer banks spread throughout the country. Number 1, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Dayton, Ohio. It's not a surprise. We already knew that. Number 2, CIA headquarters, Langley, Virginia. Number 3, NSA headquarters, Fort Meade, Maryland. Now, this witness within the Stringfield dictation notes, he made a cryptic remark regarding these files, and he says, quote, they will bend in any direction to keep them secret. So that's what we're up against. That's what we're up against. The concept of UFO crash retrievals was classified higher than the atomic bomb during World War II. It was classified above top secret. So that's where Timothy Good got the name of his book, Above Top Secret. It comes from this. Now, we talked about the files. What about where are the ET craft being stored? This is according to Stringfield military witnesses. Number 1, NSA headquarters, Fort Meade, Maryland. Number 2, MacDill Air Force Base, Tampa, Florida. Number 3, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Goldsboro, North Carolina. So if you want to see the bodies in the craft, this is where we need to go. We've got multiple locations. Obviously, what they did is early on, they diversified their portfolio. They had everything heading over to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, because of 2 reasons. Number 1, they have the Foreign Technology Division there. They can test the tensile strength of the material recovered. Number 2, they have the aeromedical lab there, so they can look at biological tissue samples. That's the reason for Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, C-119 flying boxcar. This is Sierra Madre Valley, Mexico, prior to 1951. And I think this will probably be our last case here because we're running out of time. Our witness is an engineer who worked in highway construction. This is page 32 in Leonard's book. This thing was 9 feet in diameter. So what you're looking at here is a period correct C-119 flying boxcar. And we know for certain the maximum diameter of this craft that was recovered was no more than 9 feet in diameter. We know for it for sure. How do we know that? Because if you take a tape measure and you measure the interior wall thickness dimension, it's 9 feet 10 inches. So if you have a craft that's 9 feet in diameter, that allows you for 5 inches of clearance on either side. So this thing cannot be any larger than 9 feet across. That's how we arrived at those numbers here. So here's Rudy's drawing. This shows you the clamshell doors open on the C-119. They're kind of hoisting this thing up on an inclined plane, getting ready to close the clam doors here. Let's go to the next one. Here's Joseph Wraith and his full color rendering. This shows you the clamshell bay doors opened up. the retrieval operation. I'm going to go to the next slide here. Now you can see a blow up of the craft itself, and they're kind of pushing this thing up into the cargo bay of the C-119. Now, the primary eyewitness said that there were 3 deceased bodies recovered. And when he knelt down, this is in the report, which I thought was very interesting. He knelt down and touched their faces. Their skin came off on their fingers. So they were burnt pretty bad here. Let's go to the next one here. Now, I've got a world exclusive. I haven't shown this anywhere else but this before, but here is our more refined, more realistic rendering to make this even more true here. So here you see the entire scene. You've got the C-119 flying boxcar off to the left. We're going to zoom into this thing. I'm going to take you kind of inside here of the loading process. Let's zoom in a little bit closer here. Now you can kind of see the clamshell bay doors opened up. Let's do one further JPEG. We're going to go down about 15 degrees, and I'm going to take you over here. Now you can see the retrieval operation here. Let's go one more. I'm going to blow this up a little bit. Now you can see them pushing the craft into the back clamshell bay doors. And I've got time for one more slide here for the bodies. And this is what they look. This was not for the faint of heart. This is something that would affect you mentally for quite some time. This is according to the military witness that was basically discovered by Leonard Stringfield. So in this presentation, what I wanted to do, just kind of give you a brief overview of the mission critical crash retrieval cases within the Stringfield collection. Now, the goal of all of this is to preserve our history, the history that we paid for, preserve our history through the use of drawings, sketches, illustrations, and full color renderings. And if we can do that, and if we can identify the last of the remaining legacy military firsthand witnesses by Leonard Stringfield, if we can get to their bosses in open congressional hearings, then we can really move this ball forward. And I want to thank you for your attention.
Talk about disclosure. This is exactly the bottom line of disclosure right here, Michael, right? I mean, this needs to be put forward at the start, the baseline, right? I mean, wouldn't you say that? And also Patterson, who owned National Cash Register, got into the Wright Field. So that's why it's Wright Patterson. Patterson was a really rich guy who probably had access to all these UFO secrets when he merged with the Wright Field in Dayton. So,
I mean, that back at the time, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio was the clearinghouse for all of this. I mean, it absolutely, everything came to Wright Field. And later on, they discovered we have to diversify our portfolio. We can't keep everything in one area. And that's what they did. They started farming out craft to different locations. Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Edwards North Base, Eglin Air Force Base. This is exactly what they've done.
So Michael, are you saying that this was happening before they started sourcing them out to different areas? This is before Roswell?
Yeah, we've got multiple cases prior to Roswell, 1942. We've got Cape Girardeau, 1941. So many cases prior to Roswell, yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
And do you know what's the oldest case that you've come across?
Well, if you'd believe Dave Grush, which there does appear to be some meat on the bones here, we could go back to 1933 in Italy. Eventually, the Vatican was involved in that. The Pope was involved in that. The United States government got involved in that. So we can go back to 1933.
Someone asked about Jackie Gleason. Where was it that Jackie Gleason showed Richard Nixon the bodies?
Yeah, that was Homestead Air Force Base. Homestead Air Force Base.
And now it's not there anymore. The thing I want to say about Patterson, he owned National Cash Register. He was one of the richest people in the country because their cash registers were everywhere. So there must have been some technological development NCR did with some of that reverse engineering, right?
Probably. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense.
Okay. So
what would you say, Michael, to, a lot of people when say that I post a video online of declassified video, even if it's the Nimitz incident or other ones, because more have come out now. And a lot of people, they throw the baby out with the bathwater because they say, oh, that's one of ours. And then all of a sudden it's kind of like, we don't even need to interact with it anymore. This isn't ET, it's just one of ours. But in my mind, isn't one of ours a reverse engineered craft that came from something otherworldly? What's your
Yeah,
opinion on
that's
that?
why they call them alien reproduction vehicles. There is
Right.
an origin to this phenomenon. There absolutely is. The only thing I'm saying is when you look at the form, fit, and function of a lot of these craft, for example, you talk about the Nimitz, you talk about the Tic Tac. When I was at the Gray Barker collection in Clarksburg, West Virginia, I pulled up an auto binder report from 1964 that taught, this is in Pennsylvania, what this woman saw was something that looked like a water boiler. It looked like a Tic Tac. And then she said it had 6 prongs sticking up from the side of it. And at the end of each prong, there was a little sphere. Now, if you compare, this is 1964, if you compare that to the high res video that was taken of the Nimitz event, it also, the Tic Tac also has these prongs sticking out of it as well. So this technology dates a lot earlier than I think we all realize.
Let me ask you a question about a point you brought up. If the American people are paying the military basically to do these crash retrievals, and they're giving those crash retrievals to private industry, and private industry is capitalizing on the reverse engineering, making fortune, doesn't that money belong to the American people? Isn't it highly illegal?
See, you're very well connected. I like the direction you're going down here. See, that's the dirty deal. That's the dirty deal that the United States government made with the defense contractors. So basically, they said, we only want to know 2 things. Number one, we want to know about the free energy applications that are associated with the propulsion systems of these vehicles. And we want to know about the weapons advanced technology that we can exploit from these vehicles. And so what they did is they told the defense contractors, we don't care what you need to do. You know, you can trickle down this technology, you can commercialize it. All we want to know are those 2 things. And that's the dirty deal they did. And so what they did is they moved it out of a top secret classification and they moved it into a privatized defense contractor proprietary facility. And that's why FOIAs will not get to it, because they won't go to proprietary. And that's what they've done.
Part of that dirty deal, I think, is that whoever gave that to the defense contractors is getting a kickback privately, right?
Sure,
so someone in the Pentagon's making money about dealing these craft, and so that's highly illegal too. Because it belongs to the American people. That's the thing we need to demand. How do we go about doing that?
Yeah, well, it's important that we track down these final legacy witnesses, because this is the final curtain call on UFO crash retrievals. It literally is the final curtain call. Almost all of these firsthand military witnesses, they're almost all dead. That's why it's incumbent upon us to track down Leonard's legacy witnesses before they're all gone. And at that point, it will be cover-up complete, according to the government. That's why it's important to track these people down.
Right. And then a lot of them seem to be coming out right now, right? Like the documentary that we just showed, there's a bunch of people we haven't seen before. And just recently, there were 2 people on Joe Rogan's show about a month ago. Forget the names right now. And they were with, is it Jake Barber? Is that the guy that just came out?
Yeah.
Right. They were working with him. And I guess Jake Barber in an interview mentioned their names. And then they so-called got outed. So they went on Joe Rogan and they began speaking about interaction with mantis beings, with Nordic type beings, you know,